Redditors who have cut family members off from their lives. What was the final straw for you? Overheard her planning to sabotage my vehicle and set me up to get fired from a job so I would be forced to stay under her roof longer and pay her bills and do all the chores. It was my mom. Story 2. I had been in the hospital for over a month, nearly dying from a rare disorder. My dad had came and spent time with me almost every day. Where, as my mom, not even a phone call. When I finally got out and was at home, I called her to update on her on what had been going on with me, and she dominated the conversation. She somehow made the entire situation about her, and how worried she was, what she would have done if that happened to her, etc. My 2-year-old ran up to me and was hugging my leg, and as I looked down into the eye of my baby, I realized I couldn't even imagine if my baby had just gone through what I did. Not visiting, not calling, and making every conversation about me. That was pretty much the last time I ever talked to my mom. My sister had already cut Mom from her life, and that moment was when it dawned on me, Mom really doesn't care about us. She doesn't actually love us. A loving mother would never have treated their children the way that woman treated us. Story 3. I cut my uncle out of my life the day my gran passed. She had cancer, and the last 3 months of her life, she lived out in complete agony. My mother and I moved in with her to care for her full-time. I was only 18, working, and still in full-time education. It took so much out of me. My uncle didn't offer us a hand once, and when we asked him for help, he was essentially like, no, she smells like piss. In the days leading up to her death, when she was pretty much a vegetable, he finally came round to discuss how her money was going to be handled, demanding he was entitled to more than us because he was the eldest. Despite the fact that he was incredibly well off, didn't do anything to help my gran while she was dying, and the fact my mother and I were essentially living in poverty at the time. All he cared about was her money. It's been 2 years since she died, and all of that stuff is still being sorted out. But I refuse to talk to him now. I hate him. He's such a heartless pig that couldn't even be upset about his mother dying because he was so excited at the prospect of receiving money. Story 4. When my father took a phone call from me and I asked him to please be alone for it. I poured out my heart and soul for 9 minutes. Tears, sobs, tragedy. I hung up and he texted me a few minutes later saying he had put me on speakerphone and the whole family had heard everything. I responded that it was the last thing they would ever hear of me. Story 5. The night before we thought my son was going to pass, removal of ventilator and expected him to pass shortly after, my dad told me how awful of a mother I was. Never talked to him again. It's been 8 years. Story 6. Loaning them $40,000, which I had to borrow, to prevent foreclosure of the family farm, after they begged me for months, only to have them pretend it was a gift, and making me hire an attorney to get the money back. To make it worse, they even accused me of forging documents, etc., to show it was a loan, trying to ruin my name in the process. Fortunately, they had paid for 4 years, and that was what saved me. Story 7. My nephew, who was raised more or less as my little brother, stole my deceased father's coin collection from my mother, put it in a Coinstar machine, and used the money he got to score substance. Haven't spoken to him since. I can't. Story 8. When I was 9, my mom told me that she had wanted Lost Me, but they weren't readily available in 1959, so I was lucky. Over the years it was on, off with her. I'd swear her out of my life and then let her back in. I was blamed for everything that was wrong in her life and everyone else's. When I was in my mid-50s, she screamed at me on the phone and repeated more than once that she hated me. I now will allow a text here and there, but we don't speak, and I am totally fine with the situation. When I was 15, my father ended his life side, leaving us with this mother. She dragged us to church, as she was convinced his death would send us to hell. We met a wonderful couple with 3 kids of their own, relatively close to our ages in exact order. 2 girls, then a boy. Turned out they lived close to us, and all of the neighborhood kids knew them, and hung out at their house. We started to do the same. If it hadn't been for this couple, I have serious doubts as to whether or not the 3 of us would have survived. Story 9. She's an addict. No amount of love and support from us is going to change that. She has to change by herself, and right now, she doesn't seem to be able to do that. She's lied to us, stolen from us, lied to us some more, and now there is no trust left. She's the only person that I have banned from my home. The final straw was her coming to the house with a friend, both of them obviously under the influence, and she kept going to the bathroom looking for medication that we were hiding from the last time she stole pain medication. Story 10. When my brother finally admitted to abuse my sister and I growing up, and my mother and younger brother picked him and literally blocked me and told every single person in my bloodline that I was trash, so they all blocked me too. All so it wouldn't get out, so they wouldn't know the truth, like I was about to take out a billboard. RIP. I am an orphan now. Story 11. My aunt and uncle threw out their daughter for coming out as gay. I took her in and got a lawyer to get custody of her for me ASAP, because I didn't trust my uncle one bit and figured he'd remember he could force her to a conversion therapy camp if he still had custody. He tried, But thankfully, after I had custody and could throw him off my property and get him arrested for trying to drag her out of my home. His 2 sons are on my crap list as well for trying to sneak onto my property to rescue. I've flat out told them that if I see them on my property again, I'm hit them. That part of the family doesn't come to Christmas dinner with grandma anymore. Story 12. Years and years of being told I never do anything right by my mother. Some of the highlights: scored 99% on a test and got told I was stupid for forgetting a money on a currency equation. Made county finals for wrestling, got dropped off and asked how long before she had to be back because I'd rather go shopping than stay. Qualified as team alternate for the national championships and had to turn it down because your father and I have plans and I'm not canceling. My sister was stealing packs of cigarettes for her friends and I took the blame and beating, despite none of my friends being smokers or drinkers since we were all doing high-level sports. My son was born and she got mad that my wife breastfed because it meant she couldn't bottle feed him. I took the abuse on that one too because I didn't intervene and stop it. That last one did it for me. He's 8 now, has no idea she exists. It's been almost 7 years. Story 13. My father is an addict and a narcissist. My whole childhood had him rarely playing a significant role, and when I did see him, he had every excuse as to why. As I got a little older, I started to second-guess the context of earlier events and hear him repeat self-serving lies to people that I knew weren't true. He started getting incarcerated. Him disappearing for a weekend or even a week at a time was one thing, but him spending weeks or months in rehab or prison was a whole different thing. My mother finally kicked him to the curb, and any of the times I bothered to be around him after that, my mother never discouraged a relationship or said a bad word about it, despite having more than enough reason to. He always tried to act more like a friend than a parent. One of the last times he got arrested and went to prison was for a period of months. I didn't talk to him for a stretch. And then when I did again, I told him that if he ever touched another substances, then we were done. He would no longer be my father or have any place in my life. Fast forward a few years, and I was just laid off from a job I really enjoyed. I had just walked into my apartment and was basically in tears, knowing I had to tell my roommate that I lost my job and had no idea where my rent was going to come from in 10 days. Then I get a phone call from my sister to say that the asshat had gotten arrested and was going away for 7 years. He had let me down my whole life. He had made his addiction everyone else's fault. He badmouthed his friends, his family, my mother, her family, everybody. He missed every memorable and important event from my childhood. He never paid a cent of child support. So I grew up poor with a single mother trying to pay for herself and 3 kids. He even, at least, once took some of my stuff and sold it, presumably for substance. I'd overlooked, or at least accepted, all of that. But that news and that gut punch of disappointment on what was already a very bad day was just too much. I told her I didn't care and to let him know not to contact me if, when he got out. Unfortunately, he did eventually get out. I sincerely hoped he would just die in prison so he could stop hurting and disappointing my siblings, and has since gotten all kinds of people to feel sorry for him through a mix of his annoyingly effective charisma and also an abundance of lies. But I've held firm in not saying a word to him. He's tried sending me letters, and everyone was tossed in a bonfire unopened. He's tried having relatives pass me messages from him, but I informed them quickly that anyone acting as his mouthpiece will get cut from my life as well. And honestly, it feels great. People always say dumb crap, like, but he's still your father. You only get one, or you should forgive him for your own sake. But that's all horse crap. The thing I did for my sake was remove the toxic. It was 100% the right move, and my only regret is that I didn't do it much sooner and save some of the extra heartache. And yeah, you do only get one father. You also only get one gallbladder. And if it starts to become toxic and dangerous to your health, they cut that crap out of your body so you can continue living a healthy and happy life. So moral of the story. Don't wait to cut out crafty, toxic people. Do it and don't regret it because you deserve to be happy without them. Story 14. The final straw was a fistfight with stepmom and stepbrothers all at once. Stepmom said I wasn't welcome to the house anymore. Dad favored his new family over me. He said he'd make an agreement with my mom to skip weekend visits for no child support. I was 16 and I haven't seen, heard from, or spoken to him in 29 years. Still don't care to know if he's alive or pass. Story 15. My son hit his back when he fell off a landscaping wall in their backyard, found out they didn't watch him at all. So he sat in their backyard crying, freaking out, and bleeding until they brought him back to our house. Didn't even notice or care that something was wrong with him. They just dropped him off. I immediately helped my son with medicine and bandaged him up, left him to my wife to care for, then went to my parents' house to show what had happened with pictures and yell at them. They denied any fault for what happened and tried to say he was like that before he came over. I told them they're not allowed to see my kids unless it's at my house when I allow them to be there. They were all up in arms about that, saying I'm using the kids against them and trying to manipulate them, to which I responded, I don't trust you with my kids. You neglected them, and one got severely hurt. There will not be a next time as there shouldn't have been a this time. I'm not using them. I'm advocating for them, and I'm not letting them stay in the care of people who let one be injured, crying alone with no one to care for him. I'm not being manipulative, you're being neglectful and entitled, and if you don't see a problem with your actions, then I'm not interested in having you in our lives anymore. Haven't talked since. Story 16. Technically, my mom did the cutting off part, but when I was little, my dad kidnapped me and my sibling abroad just to get back at my mom. The mastermind behind it all was his of a mother. I know people throw this word around, but she was a true psychopath. Me and my siblings spent about a year in a house with that git being constantly psychologically and physically abused by her, as my dad drank himself into a coma. My mom eventually got us back, and we never spoke to them since. Sometimes I wonder if she's passed and think about defacing her grave and pissing on it. Story 17. I haven't cut off contact with my family, but we don't talk as much anymore. I've always been the black sheep of the family. You realize they just don't like you when you're around by the way they speak to you. My family is very condescending towards my decisions, ways of thinking. Everything I do is wrong in their eyes, and they themselves can do no wrong. Sometimes you just have to realize you will never win over people, even if they're family. It's better to leave in those situations if you find your mental health is far healthier when they're not around. Story 18. My dad stopped talking to me because he found some crap I wrote 40 years ago when I was 10, and pissed off that he abandoned me and my sister. He had come back right around that time, so it wasn't much. I was into spies and covert stuff, so who knows what it was about. He finds it 40 years later, waits until I come over on Father's Day and gets pissed off in front of me and my kids. Yeah, I haven't bothered to contact him again, though I was very careful not to angrily say anything I'll regret. I'm so tired of having to be the adult with my parent. Story 19. I put up with everything for years and years because a part of me believed that if I ever needed my mom in an emergency, she'd be there. Never had happened before, but I never needed help. An emergency happened. She wasn't there. The equation of our relationship no longer made sense. Story 20. My grandmother on my mom's side. Some background info to explain. When I was in preschool, I can distinctly remember every day after my mom dropped me off, the adults that worked there would take me to a back room and strip me down. They were looking for bruises, apparently. This was in the 80s ISOS. I never questioned it or anything till I got older and realized that was strange. In first grade, my grandmother and grandfather picked me up from school. This was strange since they lived in Iowa and I was in Mississippi, and put me in their RV for a joy ride, which turned out to go on until dark. I remember her telling me to know that she loves me and that she's doing this because I deserve better. Again, did not understand what was going on. I was just excited to be in an RV and not in school. By dark, we pulled into a parking lot, and my mom and dad pulled me from the RV, put me in the back seat, then talked to me. By talk, I remember yelling and such. There are a lot more little things she did, but those two stand out the most. I didn't find out anything about why these things happened until my grandfather passed, and I asked why we weren't going to the funeral. The grandfather wasn't my mom's dad. He was husband number 6, I believe. My mom explained to me that my grandmother hated her for divorcing a doctor, and then getting married to a man and living in dirty Mississippi. She felt my mom's horrible decision to do this meant that, in my grandmother's eyes, my mom was not fit to take care of me, and that she could do better. Apparently, the reason for what they did to me in preschool was because my grandmother had called them and told them my mother was abusing me. So they were looking for evidence, I guess. I have no idea how my parents were able to get me back from the grandparents, and have no way really of finding out all the details since my mom passed away last year. And my dad has, and still is having cluster strokes, so his memory and speech patterns are not reliable. Story 21. I cut my family off when they continuously invited my ex to family gatherings and so on, despite the fact that the relationship had ended 3 years prior to myself and my having our daughter, who is now 10 years old. My family have never met her and have made no attempt to try either. Story 22. My father told me he would prefer me to be the dying and the most miserable person on earth, as long as I was religious, rather than being happy, successful, and myself. My mother just sat there and nodded in agreement. I grabbed all my stuff and left that night. Story 23. Getting very close to with my sister. Never replies back to my texts or phone calls, and just this weekend, after being reminded, didn't wish my fiancé a happy birthday or anything. Story 24. Haven't quite cut him off yet, but it's in the works. This one is long, and I'm sure I've left stuff out. My BIL is an alcoholic. He was living in Florida, and a couple of years ago, 2017, came to live with us in MD. We ended up getting him into a rehab facility, but he got booted out when he failed a P test, shortly after he went back down to FL. Since then, we moved out of a rental into our own home. Fast forward to last August. He and his GF stopped by on their way to live with her dad in NH. Said they were tired of living in FL. Quick visit, which was fine with me. About a week later, my husband informs me his brother is coming to stay with us for a few days and that they would be there any minute. Needless to say, I was not happy and even unhappier to see the GF with him. They stayed in our partially flooded basement, where I could hear her screaming and throwing things at all hours. I have my own bedroom. When work started on the basement, they moved upstairs into my eldest son's old bedroom. Now we can hear practically everything. They get drunk, start playing music, and sing. About an hour later, she starts screaming. I can practically set a clock between when the singing starts and when the screaming starts. She can go on for 36 hours screaming at him, which makes me believe she's also doing meth or something. We've called the cops. They can't do anything. We've gotten into fights. We even tried the nice guy route. Nothing changes. My BIL has also broken his arm and a spur on his vertebrae while drunk. 2 different incidents. His kids don't talk to him anymore. Oh, and she's worked 2 jobs for a total of about 3 weeks in the last 10 months. He can't work because he's in such poor health from the alcoholism. They don't give us any money. Big surprise. I don't even know where they get money. I know they get food stamps, so I'm sure they get some kind of state funds too. Other things that have been done: cupcake for my dog's birthday found in the trash. When they were the only ones in the house, she started fights with my husband on Thanksgiving and Christmas. BF was here and I had to pull them off each other. She posts to social media like this is her house, which infuriates me. Through clothes, cups, various items out the window. Looked like a garbage dump on the side of the house. BIL will piss out the upstairs window instead of coming downstairs to the bathroom. She flushed tampons, so our septic has been clogged at least 4 times, accuses one of our friends for following her. Friend was passing by and saw GF drunk on her moped and called the police. GF has a Dewey court date in July. GF also has a hit-and-run conviction and a Dewey conviction in FL and still owes them $1,700. Put a post on FB slandering us. Got blocked after I commented with a rant on all the crap they do. BIL told us, we can't make him leave. I went to the courthouse last week and filed a complaint of wrongful detainer. The summons has been issued as of today. Just waiting for the police to serve them. I'm positive they'll be drunk when that happens. Court is on the 22nd of this month. I have worked from home since pandemic. I am stressed constantly. I'm afraid to leave them alone because she kicked holes in the basement walls, and we also found mysterious wounds on our dogs. Finally ordered a spy cam, so when I do have to leave, I can see if they're doing anything. Sometimes I can find the humor in just how absurd it all is, but mostly I just can't wait to get them out. We worked hard for 25 years to own a house, and for half the time we've lived here, I haven't been able to enjoy it. I told my husband I would divorce him if he ever mentions his brother to me again. He knows I mean it. I'm not sentimental about family. To me, you don't have to like someone just because you share DNA with them. Once they're out, I will never speak to BIL again. He is dead to me. He will never set foot in my house again, and I will not attend his funeral. I hate him with every fiber of my being for doing this to us, especially since him and my husband is all that's left of their family. He put alcohol above everything, including his children. Story 25. I cut off my mother when I was in my early 20s. I'm mid-30s now. She was a drunk and abusive, neglectful in many ways. The last straw was her showing up wasted at sunrise, screaming at me about doing chores in a house she didn't live in. She called the cops, claiming I was threatening to hit her. It's a long, stupid story and ended with me telling her, "You do this and I'll never speak to you again." She called my bluff, but I wasn't bluffing. Well, maybe I was because earlier this year I asked a family member, also estranged, but for very different reasons, for her email. I guess I just wanted to see, maybe she missed me, maybe I'd get closure, maybe she'd changed, maybe she was sorry, maybe she had cleaned up and was back to singing and painting and reading and writing and damn decoupaging the way she used to. The way she taught me before it all went to crap. After a few emails back and forth over the past few months, some of which were poorly spelled, nonsensical, erratic, and well, just wrong factually speaking, I bit the bullet and asked, "Are you still drinking?" After a few days, I got a reply. No email body, just subject line, "Yes." My soul wanted to cry, but my physical self couldn't. Her only child, my only parent. She spent all the years we were apart fostering a relationship that mattered to her, her real love, liquor. I'm currently 10 years older than she was when she had me, the same age she was when her addictions really took over. I responded thanking her for her honesty, but that I couldn't continue communication under these circumstances. She's in her 60s now, and I can't envision ever seeing her again. Honestly, I don't know if I feel a lot, a reasonable amount, or nothing at all. I could write pages and pages and pages. It's just ducked up. It's ducked and it's sad and there's nothing I can do for her. I can only heal myself. Story 26. The last year of my Mill's life, my mother was jealous and hateful of the attention we were giving my husband's super sweet mom. My mom was going to move the day after Christmas, even though we told her we can't help because both of us have jobs that the week between Christmas and New Year is particularly crucial in getting things set up. Well, she had a car accident Christmas Eve and still wanted to move in 2 days despite her broken ribs. When we told her she should postpone until we could help, she screamed and called us selfish and hateful, including my husband. Christmas Day, she made our house full of guests uncomfortable because she was mad and fuming. She had spoiled every Christmas in my life, but this was the last straw for my husband, and he said she would not be welcome on Christmas Day anymore. We've been married 30-something years, and he's been by my side with her for all of it, but losing his mom, and anyway, He reached the point he was just done. I told her I'd still help her out, but wouldn't be socializing anymore. One afternoon, she asked why, and I told her I just can't hear my mother call me names anymore. Selfish, uncaring, heartless, cruel. And her reply, well, that comes from a place of hurt. Had she said something like, I say things I don't mean when I'm upset, then we would have probably continued limping along. Anyway, my brother and family were coming in, and I was going to host Christmas dinner on the 12th of December when they were in town. But her snitty text, just before Thanksgiving, was if she's going to be alone on Christmas, she might as well be alone on Thanksgiving also. Normally, that would have sent me in olive branch mode, but instead I just sent back, okay, and never saw her again except for once. That was somewhat accidental. Not that she didn't try re-engaging over the coming years. She did, a lot. But I never could. She died this year. Story 27. I cut my brother out of my life multiple times, but the absolute final straw was when my parents gave him a last chance to put his life together. And for 6 months, he did good. Then his past caught up with him, and rather than face the music, he stole a car from my mom and disappeared. He reappeared in a completely different state a year later, but at that point, no one was accepting his calls. Then he did some bad crap and is now in prison. Story 28. Sister caused issues out of thin air. And then when challenged about it, she lied through her teeth and tried to get family on side. She had then done this on 2 occasions with a girlfriend I recently split up with because of these reasons. She failed miserably as she was found out, but it still cost me a good relationship. It's one thing causing drama, but to cause me drama and interfere in my relationship just hammers the nail in the coffin. It makes it worse that she openly admitted to me that part of the reason she caused an issue is because I wasn't speaking to her. So my thoughts were that it was the dumbest thing you can do to build a relationship with someone. It's the exact opposite of building bridges. Story 29. My dad was a deadbeat and just an all-around sack of crap. My mother single-handedly raised me while my divorced dad did his own thing. He never paid child support. He often forgets when my birthday is or how old I am. He came to my graduation. That was it. I lost it. The thing is, he wasn't even there of his own accord. My grandmother made him go, and he still took credit for shaping me into a young man. To this day, why my mother married him in the first place is a question I can't seem to figure out. Story 30. It wasn't so much the final straw, just the icing on the cake and a lifetime of crafty behavior. Here we go. I have a half-sister, same father. We had never really been close, so no big loss. Dad passed at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning in 2018. I make the phone calls, mostly leaving messages in voicemail and answering machine. Not a single person out of his 7 brothers' sisters called me back, nor did his daughter. I go over to his house at about 2 p.m. because he had a rather extensive gun collection, as well as several $1,000s in cash in a safe. My older half-sister knew about this. What she doesn't know is that years earlier, he had made me executor of his estate. He had a trust set up. It was legally my responsibility to limit the risks to his belongings once he had passed. So I load up his guns and his safe into my vehicle and change the house lock. At this point, only I have the keys to his house. I do not know who he had given keys to over the years. My half-sister calls me at 2 a.m. the next morning, Monday. Keep in mind, she was one of the people who hadn't returned the call, and it's 18 hours since our father had passed. She's screaming because she can't get into the house at 2 a.m., and I tell her that I changed the locks for the reasons listed above. She screams at me for a few minutes more, and blames me for wasting her time. It's a 30-minute trip for her. Now, she doesn't know that he set up a trust, doesn't know that I'm executor of his estate. She doesn't know anything about his will, trust, estate. She assumes she's getting everything because she had a copy of his will from 1987. Technically, aside from some money earmarked for her, everything he owns is going to me. I offer her the chance to come over and pick through some of his stuff. Some stuff I had earmarked specifically for her. Our father was a big collector of authentic Native American artifacts. He had some genuinely nice things. She sold them all on eBay, despite it being her heritage. She would pick something up, look it over, decide whether she wanted it, and either put it back where it was, instead of putting it into a box for donation, or put it into a box of things that she wanted. So things move on as the weeks go by. She makes no effort to help clear out his house, aside from the one visit where she took what she thought she could make money off of. Months go by, and I get a text one day. She still doesn't know about his estate and says, I get the house because you got the car. He gave me his car 2 years before he died because he no longer had a license. That's when I tell her that he had an estate. And once things get settled, house sold, she'll get what the estate says she gets. She got $5,000. I had a witness with me as I hand-delivered the cashier's check to her. She cashed it that day. The next day, she claims the bank wouldn't accept it because her last name was spelled wrong, despite me using the spelling she gave to me. And I tell her she's wrong because the bank cashed the check. I specifically asked for a tracking number for the check in case this specific circumstance happened. 2 years go by and not a single word from her, aside from a text from her a few weeks ago asking about one of his guns. No big loss. Story 31. The final straw of cutting off my father was blaming my mom for his repeated decision to cheat on her. She shouldn't have had a second job for so long. She had a second job because of his spending habit. She was such an idiot. She didn't like that he would full-on gawk at women while they were out. She's so vain. She was insecure because he kept gawking at other women all the time. Don't blame innocent people for your own crafty decisions. Story 32. Some of my cousins because they lied to my mother regarding a musical instrument of mine that they decided to steal. The truth of the matter is if they asked, I would have sold it to them pretty cheap. But the lying and taking it without my permission. The sad thing is that I'm one of the few family members that was on their side, or at least would hear them out, as they are considered black sheep of the family by other family members and looked down upon. They essentially burned their last bridge within our family. I've still yet to receive an apology 5 years later. Story 33. My brother. He was 5 years older than me and always had a bit of a temper. When I was stationed in Arizona, he lost his job because he picked a fight with his boss. I let him live with me for a while, but realized he wasn't working and was selling his mechanic's tools for pennies on the dollar so he could watch TV, smoke, and drink. Finally, one day my dog got out of the house and took off down the street. My brother drove down the street looking for him, but a neighbor apparently pulled out in front of my brother's truck. So my brother got pissed, got up behind him at the stop sign, and used his truck to push neighbor's car into oncoming traffic. Neighbor drove into the nearest driveway and ran out to see if he could use a phone. This was way before cell phone. Calls cops. I come home to see cop cars in front of my house. I walk in and start getting grilled because of the description given by the neighbor. It sounded more like me than my brother. I had a very provable alibi, so they start looking at my brother. He lies to the cops, obvious lies. Cop tells him he isn't going to arrest him tonight, but he's giving a criminal charge and to show up at court. My brother mouths off to the cops. I stepped in, told him to shut the hell up and let the cops leave to do their jobs. After that, I told him he was putting my military career in jeopardy and he had till the end of the year to get a job and get out. He did nothing. But on the 31st of December, I told him I was going to a party and he'd better be moved out when I came back. Last time I talked to him for years. He was abusive to my sister, my mother, and me when he was younger and nearly got into a fight with my sister at my parents' funeral, another cop calling on us, so I was done. Story 34. There's a lot of drama and mental illness on one side of my family, and I decided I don't want to live like they do. I had to cut them off to improve my life situation. I've distanced myself from my parents because of my father's complete disinterest in me and my mother's inability to be a mother. There was a last straw with her. Backstory is that my ex-husband realized he's gay. But instead of telling me, cheated and left when I got fed up over it and stopped carrying him financially, I found out after he left that he was HIV positive, so I had to be tested and the results took a week. I was obviously extremely upset and called my mother for comfort, but instead she said she couldn't believe X abandoned her and then proceeded to complain about my father and grandmother mistreating her, until my work break was over. I've spoken to her since then, but I completely dropped the rope after that. It's not her fault she's mentally ill, but I don't have to torture myself by trying to have a relationship. Story 35. My cousin is a known harasser with family members. I found that out the wrong way. They blame me even though I never ever accepted his advances and never showed any interest in his conversation. He is also known to like kids. However, they get along with him and blame everyone but him. So I cut all of my family off and he as well. Story 36. Before my fiancée passed away cancer, I promised her that I would watch over and take care of her 4 children, all teenagers. When she passed, I did my best to keep things as normal for them as possible. Kept them in the same house, same schools, same routines, etc. I also paid for attorneys to battle their abusive father, who they had not seen in years, from gaining custody. These additional expenses drained my bank accounts and put me in debt. I was working in a family business and often deferred my paychecks. I'd accumulated around $50,000 in deferred salary. So one day I approached my father about getting $20,000 of the $50,000 that was owed to me. He was very wealthy and $20,000 was just a drop in the bucket to him. I knew he would make things difficult though because he was in a hole who loved opportunities like this to squeeze people. I explained the situation I was in and he responded with, "What would happen if I don't give you the money?" I told him that we would lose their family home and we would all be out on the street. He then said, "That might not be a bad lesson for you to learn. They aren't your kids, you don't owe them anything." I said, "True, I don't owe them anything, but I do owe their mother." For the next hour, he dragged me over the coals, making me beg, plead, cry, threaten, etc. For my money, he got off on it. After I was beaten down and exhausted, he wrote me a check. He told me he wasn't sure there was enough money in the account to cover the check, but to try depositing it anyways. When he left to go to the bathroom, I peeked into the checkbook. The account had a balance of $400,000. When he returned, he asked if I wanted to grab some dinner with him as if nothing had happened. I noped out and told him I had to head home, 2 hours away. As I drove away, I decided that from that day on, any relationship I had with him would be strictly professional. I would never give him the opportunity to personally hurt me again. I only saw him a couple of times after that, not at all the last 3 years of his life. If my son were to come to me and ask for help in taking care of the 4 kids of his dead fiancé, I would be super proud of the son I had raised and do whatever I could for him. My father just used my situation to be a banana. Now that he is gone, there is no way he is looking down on me. He's looking up. Story 37. A cousin I hosted during the pandemic. My cousin turned the first lockdown into a living hell, then refused to finish paying me her share of rent, not even half. I couldn't defend myself for the sake of peace, because lockdown and we're 24 hours a day inside. It was supposed to be for a month, starting from March 2020. Then the pandemic hit, and the month ended to 7 months in a one-room apartment. So, 2 days after she moved in, I was talking to her normally in the morning. Suddenly, she yelled at me. She said she doesn't like talking in the morning and that it pisses her off. I was humiliated and also scared. The coming days, I wouldn't dare talk to her. I don't know when her morning ends. Sometimes 5 or even 7 p.m. hits and no word was told to each other, yet she talks on the phone. And when she talks on the phone, she does so loudly as if she's alone in the world. And it's always me who breaks the silence. I ask her repeatedly to put her stuff in the basement because the room is small for 2 and their stuff. She said okay, and never did. I put some of my own stuff there and asked her to do the same. Said okay, then said she doesn't want to because there are spiders there. She didn't even participate in buying any groceries, and I, scared of her, wouldn't dare tell her she must do so. Then April came. I gathered some lady balls and asked her to participate in paying rent. Come on, it's unbelievable to live off of me. Her mother was so angry, and so was she, but ended up agreeing for 30%. But her behavior became worse. She wakes up at 1 p.m. or even after, and I make no sound and keep the room dark. She quit household chores forever and buying any kind of groceries or even trash bags for crying out loud. One day, I thought, what if I don't break the silence? Let's see what happens. Days go back and she doesn't say a single word to me. We stop talking when we live in the same damn room and she moves and laughs and showers and talks on the phone. The day she left, she didn't bother telling me. I just returned home and most of her stuff wasn't there. She texted she would pass by, give me my key, and take the rest. And I didn't get any money for the last month. A few weeks later, I texted her for the rest of the rent. She said no. She's never paying for March as the agreement started in April. That was the last contact with her. Story 38. My immediate and extended family are by and large angry idiots. Lots of alcoholism, anger issues, domestic abuse issues, conspiracy theorists. Absolutely everything that has gone wrong in their lives is the fault of the government. Big pharma, people like me who toe the line by having a career, house, etc. Cynicism to the point of making you want to kill yourself. Non-stop complainers. The list goes on. The final straw was finding out that there was a situation where either there was real sexual abuse and the victim was told not to tell the police so that the accused wouldn't go to jail, or the victim made the whole thing up to bilk me out of money. I lost only a couple $100, whether it was a scam or not. But they lost me as a relative for good, so I think I came out on top. Story 39. I have an aunt I cut ties with. When I was a kid, I had a dog. He was my dog. Like I was his human. He was my dog. He liked everyone else in the family, but he was mine. You know how they sometimes choose a person. Anyway, this dog meant everything, and every last person in my family knew how much I loved him. I had him from the time I was 3 to the time I was 19, so my whole life. My aunt was a veterinary tech and had 13 dogs herself, as well as many other animals. I was very close to her growing up, as I wanted to be a vet as well. She knew better than anyone how much I loved that dog. Fast forward to me being 18. My dog is very old. I've just graduated and got a new job that will require me to not be home often enough to care for an elderly dog. I asked my aunt to care for him, as I trusted her more than anyone else. She and I agreed that if she was going to have to put him down, that she would call me and I would be there, because I wanted to hold him while he passed on, so he could smell me and feel comforted. Well, apparently since I didn't come to visit my dog at her house more than once a week or so, she decided in her own mind that I just didn't care about him anymore. One morning I woke up to a voicemail from my grandma who lived in California. I lived in Oklahoma. She and I were not very close, but we kept in touch on the phone. I listen and hear, "Hey there, honey. I just wanted to call and check on you. I heard little Riki pass. I know how hard that must be for you. You love that little dog so much." Turns out my aunt had put him down a week before that and just did not tell me because she felt that I just didn't care anymore. I was devastated. She took that moment away from me to be with him. He didn't die in his sleep. She took him in and had him put down without telling me. I cut her out and haven't spoken to her. That was 13 years ago. Story 40. When my mother blamed me for almost getting kidnapped, I was 16 at the time of the incident. The screaming, crying, running around kind of crazy losing crap. The whole family was ducked up in their heads and both abusive. I knew that if I didn't get out, that something horrible would happen eventually. I ended up moving several states away from them. Story 41. My dad's brother becoming an addict, cheating on his wife, and being a failed example for his two sons. My last straw was visibly seeing how it affected my dad and how he bottled it inside for so long. He took our family on a trip to Disney World in Orlando, and we stayed in one of the Disney hotels. We were in one of the happiest places on earth to be as a kid, and every morning began with my mom holding my dad as he cried uncontrollably, thinking about his brother. I was feeling a mixed bag of sorrow and anger that in this once-in-a-lifetime family vacation that my dad is not really there with us. I made it my goal to be a role model for my uncle's two sons. And we have great relationships, and they are doing great things to this day. I only see my uncle and his wife when they come to our office for my family company to pay their bills. Story 42. My file. He came out to my love on their 25th anniversary that he was gay and wanted to be free to be his authentic self. Okay, fine. But he'd badly mistreated my love their whole marriage, cutting her down, calling her ugly, stupid, etc. He was openly cruel to my husband his whole life, and when we met and fell in love, hated me with a passion. Found out in the years following their divorce that he'd cheated on her their whole marriage, giving her HPV, which turned into cancer. He visited us crap all over me, his son, our lives there, and kept up with the cruelty. My husband and I were done. In the next decade, we had our 3 baby boys, and he never met them. My love Andy were close, and she blossomed after the divorce and made a lovely life for herself. Then she got cancer. We had her for 7 beautiful years, and she was an awesome grandma. She died, and less than a year later, my husband passed. My Phil came after me and tried to take my 7, 8, and 10 years old sons away from me. He thought his money would help him win. I mortgaged my house, hired a pie, and got him in some very compromising positions. Subpoenaed his cell phone, computer records, and busted him with filthy CP. I won, got a restraining order, and exposed just enough to get him on the state predator list. If he crossed state lines or tried to contact my children, I'd release it all, and he'd rot in prison for the rest of his life. He stayed away until my youngest turned 18 and contacted them on FB. I sent him copies of the filth I had on him, and he never bothered us again. I Googled his name every so often and found out he passed this past January. He will never be able to hurt my children ever again, and now I can breathe free. Story 43. When my twin sister beat me up at my mother's funeral because I dared to challenge her on her ridiculous lies that she has 7 master's degrees, yet she's missing teeth because she's an addict. Story 44. Just did it yesterday. She's lied multiple times about me and my family. Her latest lie was that my husband was sleeping with his massage therapist before his chiropractic appointment. So I said, screw it. If I'm going to be painted as the evil daughter-in-law, I might as well play the part better than she could ever imagine. Story 45. I was bedridden for 3 years with a severe autoimmune disorder. I was on the same immunosuppressants that some cancer patients take. My older sister said I was making the family uncomfortable, and if I didn't change, there would be consequences. She also went on Tinder dates and traveled to Hawaii during pandemic. Finally cut that off, and the rest of my family thinks I'm being dramatic. Story 46. I appear to be the first to comment on religious grounds, which surprises me a lot. My brother is a Jehovah's Witness and claims it is his right to proselytize to whomever and whenever he wants. He is not welcome in my home or anywhere with my family, and his letters are returned unopened. Story 47. This was after I had to have surgery and lost my baby. I was expressing how I was feeling to my adoptive mother. My birth mother is not in my life. Telling her I was very sad, and she replied, "You shouldn't be sad about this. You don't see the baby." I forgave her for this and told myself she just didn't understand my pain. 2 weeks later, she finds out she's pregnant and asks me to come around more. I told her, I would that I'd just been depressed, and she replied back, "You had no reason to be depressed. Do you think at my gender reveal you could act like you are the one that's pregnant and then I surprise people and tell them it's really me after?" I told her, "No, I wouldn't be comfortable." She said, "Okay." The next morning, she asks me the exact same thing. I just never replied. I had my surgery at the beginning of this April, and she just asked me this like 2 weeks ago. While I'm still healing, I just made the decision to cut her off. I have plenty more toxic situations with her since I was little, 13. But I'm 22 now, and I feel like she isn't a positive person in my life or for my mental health, so good riddance. Story 48. I slowly started having less and less contact with my parents when I went into foster care at 15. Final straw was long before that. But legally, I couldn't block them out of my life until I turned 18, but I could wean myself off them bit by bit until that day. I think the final straw was probably the day I finally got out. My mother had called the police saying I threatened to hit my younger sibling. I had been locked in my room since I had come home from school and hadn't even spoken to anyone else. The cop that came that night gave me a choice on how I could finally leave that crafty, abusive situation, and I took it. The final straw was when I walked downstairs with the cop and she was tearfully saying how I shouldn't go and how much she'd miss me and on and on. After the years of hell and horror she put me through, I was just done. And I knew as soon as I could, I would be cutting her and her husband out of my life. Went no contact the day I turned 18 and haven't spoken to either for 7 years. One of the best decisions I have ever made. Story 49? I've cut my aunt out of my life for multiple reasons, but the one that got to me the most was pretty serious. And someone could have ended up in jail had their funny plan. Last year, my aunt and her daughter lived with them because they were just moving in from Texas and didn't have any other willing family in the new state. As they lived with us, yelling matches went on weekly. My mom, who owned the house, would get on my aunt's case because she wasn't helping out the house and not following certain rules set in place, such as not having food outside the kitchen. The event that did it for me was 5x as bad. Since in Texas, substances is illegal, and in the state she just moved into, it is. She still had another daughter in Texas. And my aunt's granddaughter was down there, and their birthday was soon, seeing as the birthday was coming up. My aunt decided that it was an amazing idea too. Send substances through the damn mail to Texas where it is illegal, and not through their own mail. Through my dad's damn job because it was cheaper. Had the mail company found it, they could have arrested my dad since transporting substances to where it is illegal is a federal crime. 5 months later, they were kicked out. We've ignored them because of other reasons. This being the main, but I have another personal reason, that being she was watching TV while I was in class, Zoom, and it was too loud, so I went to turn it down. A moment later, it was twice as loud, so I went to turn it down again. And the remote was gone. She yelled at me, and I was just astonished she'd pick a fight with a teen that was in class, her being a 50-some-odd-year-old woman. I have massive resentment towards her and how she treated my family, and I don't want to see her again. Story 50. My only sibling, my brother, and I went outside to clear the air after another of his personal attacks. In the middle of my speaking, he interrupted and said, "This is bullcrap," and walked back into the house. I thought, he wouldn't attack any of his friends like he does me, and he wouldn't walk away from any of them. I yelled after him, "If you keep walking, the next time we see each other will be at Mom and Dad's funerals." He didn't break his stride and walking. No one else in my life treats me that way, so why should be allowed to do so? The only times I've seen him since have been at funerals. Story 51. It's a long story, but in short, my nephew committed statutory abuse. My sister covered it up and had him fake a proposal to get CPS off his back. She then took the girl in, groomed her to trust her, then had paperwork drawn up to get custody and tricked the girl into signing it. She then kicked the girl out and kidnapped the baby. She topped it off by cashing out her 401k in a legal custody battle and tried to legally steamroll a teenager. I and my whole family were just so disgusted that we all told her that we were done. I live states away, so I wasn't involved, but my family testified against her in court and helped fund the girl's legal fees. Numerous times, my sister filed false CAPS complaints against the girl and would do whatever she could to make her life harder. 2 years later, she got primary but partial custody of her kid. In that time, we all learned what narcissism was, and my sister's dramatic life stuff all started to really click. We've realized she's a true narcissist, and we've all cut her husband, and her son out. Meanwhile, the girl involved has been picked up as a family member. She found a guy to marry who is happy to be a dad and has been a great mom to the kid, despite my sister's protestations. Story 52? He beat his girlfriend. He was a great uncle for most of my childhood, but the siren call of the bottle was too strong for him to ignore. Story 53? Cut my dad off almost 6 years ago. After years of verbal abuse, treating me like crap, always making me prove myself and having to earn his love, support, and respect. While my brothers were golden boys who could do no wrong while I was just an idiot like my mother, the final straw came when I told him I was getting married and he reacted by being a huge jackass once again. What? That's the crappiest thing you could do. He adored the man I was with, was just bitter because his marriage to my mom ended in divorce. Then he said, "Well, we'll have to get together," the parents, at some point. No way I'm getting ducked paying everything on my own again. Never ever paid anything about me. My life on his own. Had been salty about paying child support for 10 years. Even though it's the law, he always acted as if my mom was just a greedy idiot, wanting to take all his money from him, telling us about it when we were just 8 and 5 until we were old enough to understand. I told him we intended on paying for the whole thing on our own. I was expecting nothing from him. Then it was, "Who's going to be there?" Knowing what he was going to say, I asked, "Why? Because you won't want to come, depending on who's going to be there?" "Yeah, I won't come depending on who's there," the who being my mother. She had left him nearly 20 years before. He had been in a relationship with my stepmother for more than 15 years and had a child with her. But seeing my mom at my wedding was apparently too much to bear for him. So I told him to not even bother coming. He was not invited. He replied, "Great, one less crafty thing to do." I hung up on him and never called him back. Story 54. When my mother demanded a list of all of my friends' contact information, phone number plus addresses, so that in case I didn't answer my cell phone, she could call one or all of them to find out where I was. I was 27 years old at the time, found a new place to live, packed up and left 2 weeks later. Damn that. I should note that my mom is textbook narcissist. She had 99% control over everything in my life, that is finances, cell phone, etc., and proceeded to continuously abuse me in every way possible. Before the list incident, she also demanded that I exhaust all of my money, not hers, in continuously applying for school to finish my degree and get an accounting degree on top of that. Story 55. I cut my grandparents out of my life about a year and a half ago. A year prior to that, they claimed they had no clue what they had done wrong but wanted to make things right. I sat down with them and explained thoroughly. Essentials. My grandma got pregnant, then married. This was the 60s, so it was still a bit scandalous. Then she regretted it all. Kicked my grandfather out, got remarried, and coerced Grandpa into signing away his parental rights, so she could flee to Central America with my dad and her new husband. They had 3 more kids together and always treated my dad as the git. Now everyone is adults and have kids of their own. They have always treated the other 3 kids in their families as their real family, and me and my siblings as the product of the worst mistake of her life. She could never get over it. So I pointed all this out to her, explained how they treated the other families significantly better. They said they wanted to have a relationship, and that they didn't mean for it to be that way. They left, and 12 months later, they hadn't reached out to me once while I see that they are always spending time with the grandkids they like. I wrote another letter and told them they didn't have to pretend like they like me anymore. Called my grandma the surrogate and egg donor. Thanked her for that. Called her husband the abusive stepfather that never loved my dad, and then I told them to never contact me again. It was very freeing, and I do not regret it. I gave them so many opportunities to even put it minimal effort, and they just didn't care. Removing toxic people from your life is worth it, even if they are family. Story 56. When I learned that the money that my parents gave my sister to keep her on her feet just fueled her addiction that she hides from them so that they can keep giving him money. Not only does she live in my parent house rent-free, but the one thing my parents asked was that she marry her BF before she moves in. My parents are Mormon, so don't like her living with someone she isn't married to. She has refused to do this despite her BF and his 2 kids living with her. Just icing on the cake. BFS, baby mama, lost custody of because she was on Met. The same substances of choice for both my sister and her BF, yet they have the audacity to talk crap about the baby mama. Story 57. My over 40-year-old brother called me after I was separated from my husband and suffering from walking pneumonia and demanded that I get over it and start planning his birthday that was a month away. I had cut him out once for his drinking and violent rage problems. He started drinking again, started getting verbally abusive again, and I was done. For good this time. I honestly hate him for all the violence and abuse I endured at his hands. I will never allow him to make me feel like that again. Story 58. My orientation was outed by my sibling to the rest of the family. I tried to end my life twice after that. The most horrible period in my entire life. Please, if someone tells you something very personal and private, do not share it with others. Story 59. When they weren't willing to take the simplest precautions to keep my newborn safe in a global pandemic, yet still expected me to give them full access to my child. I could overlook the years of physical and mental abuse from my childhood, but I absolutely will not risk the health and safety of my child. Story 60. My mother showed up, unwanted and uninvited, to my 10-year-old nephew's memorial service, damn cancer, and started a fight with my sister, calling her a git. Let me repeat that. She instigated a fight with a grieving mother at her son's memorial service. Story 61. My father is an alcoholic narcissist, so there's a laundry list of wrongs. The dagger was refusing to contribute to my student loans after he'd held it over my head as a bargaining chip for those 4 years. He laughed when the university threatened legal action for non-payment because it would end up falling on my shoulders. He never paid a dime. Story 62. I cut off my sil for good after she told me she was glad my dad died. We tried for years and bent over backwards for her to just continue to spew hate. Once at Sunday dinner at my parents' house, we were talking about my dad's father. We were explaining some of the differences in Judaism and Christianity to the kids, and out of nowhere, Sayal says offensive things about religion. We all stared at her in shock. She was serious. My brother is still married to her because he says he's afraid to lose his kids. We still see him, rarely, but haven't seen the kids in years. Story 63. I sat down and had a talk with my bio mom, the subject being her not mentioning, talking about or talking to her family about me, my kids, or my in-laws. In other words, your family is your family, not mine, and I do not want to hear about them, period, end. Why? Because my cousin's husband abused me and the entire family called me names. Later, it came out that he had abused both of his children. And once again, her family blamed me. She was a chicken crap and just let it go. As I was approaching 40 and every single occasion that she was invited to by in-laws, it had to be all about her and how great her family was. The last straw was the Christmas my oldest granddaughter was born. I had a broken arm, and my bonus daughter had had a C-section and came home with the baby on Christmas Eve. She threw a fit because no one would go get the baby from her mother or make bonus daughter come up a winging spiral staircase so that she could hold the baby. There were then comments about, in my family. I would have driven her home right then and there, but one of my children, probably my daughter, convinced me not to. I just ended up saying, "Mother, it's not happening. Bonus daughter needs to rest. It's her baby. Either sit down and be quiet or I will take you home." I was nice and didn't make a scene. I took her into the hallway and told her this. Story 64. My aunt from dad's side are a holes. She treated my mom horribly when she got married to my father. He used to be away on work trips a lot, otherwise he wouldn't have let this stand. She basically stole a property from us using my grandmother's generosity, who's a naive sweetheart, because you need to support the weaker sibling, and didn't even acknowledge my father's existence in the housewarming party of a house they bought from selling his property. What's a shame is that I used to love her daughter like she was my real sister and maybe more. And now she is basically a stranger I haven't talked to in 4 years. Story 65. As an adoptee, I cut off my mom's side because they denied any abuse when I finally came out at 20 about it. My dad said he vaguely remembered something, like me screaming for help from the bathroom for the first 6 years of my life. I was deemed mentally retarded by 1 year old due to my fear of men and boys. My mom hid that paperwork from me for years. She just randomly gave it to me one day when I was about 27. I'm still coming to terms with it almost 10 years later. I do believe a brother and dad abused me also, but I only have one memory that isn't the greatest of only my dad. When I found the birth family, it was a fairy tale for a while. But when I asked to change my last name to theirs, all of a sudden I was the worst person, but they knew nothing of my abuse. The agency told me not to talk about it. Then it got worse when I tried to buy a house from my sister, and my brother warned me not to do any business with it. I should have listened when my entire life got thrown upside down. I only speak to 2 family members from that family now, one of which being another sister who found us a year after I did. Crazy thing about that sister, we graduated from the same high school 6 years apart and lived 5 blocks apart for a short time without ever knowing it. And our birth city was on the other side of the state. Life is insane. Story 66. Grandmother, grandfather, cornered my GF on a visit when I was out. Told her what a horrible person she was for not continuing to be a teacher, even though the pay was so low she couldn't afford to live, and berated her for about an hour about a wide range of things. I returned to find her a complete blubbering mess, having been ganged up on by the 2 of them. I packed, and we left that day after I told them both off. She wasn't perfect by any means, but she didn't deserve to be ambushed like that. I was disgusted. When I discovered she was signing my name to take cash out of the account I was using to get her bills caught up so she could buy more liquor. You're on your own after that, Mom, Rip. She stole checks to forge my name and get wasted. Grandmother, of course, insisted Mom was fine and still insisted even after she drank herself to death. Literally. You'd think being married to an alcoholic, my grandmother would have been better able to spot it. My aunt, after one too many bullcrap FB posts. Story 67. Growing up, my parents were always fighting. My dad was hit by a car and was mentally not who he used to be and began abusing my mom and forcing her to do awful acts with other couples. Eventually, he confessed this. We already had a bad relationship because he had anger problems and hit me a few times. I haven't talked to him since then and never will. They divorced shortly after that. Years later, my mom remarried and I didn't like the guy. He's not violent or anything, just a complete doormat. He and my mom got into fights all the time. Eventually, my wife and her opened up a daycare against me saying not to. After a few months, they got into it and stopped the daycare. My mom then began calling us names to people and degrading us on social media. I decided to exile her. I then lost 100 pounds. We got pregnant after 3 years of trying, got my degree, and got a better job. After my son was born, I gave her a chance to be in his life, but the public degrading had to stop. She declined, saying she wasn't going to walk on eggshells. I said okay, and exiled her again. She has since called my work to saying I hacked her accounts and told the FBI investigator who did my clearance that I hacked her account and pirate movie. Now I have 2 kids that will never know her and be around that extreme level of dysfunctionality. Story 68. My dad was a pretty big a hole all his life to just about everyone around him. He's entitled and rude and likes to believe that as long as it's the truth, he is allowed to say anything and no one is allowed to get angry. It was his birthday, and I had traveled about an hour and a half on 2 different modes of transit to come help celebrate, and when I walked into the restaurant where he was already sitting, I said, "Happy birthday, Dad!" And he said, "You've gotten so fat." It wasn't even an attempt at a joke. He just thought it was okay to say whatever he thought was true. This was the final straw in a giant hay barrel of terribly demeaning behavior from him, and 4 years later. I have no doubt that I did the right thing. It turns out that all I had ever really been doing was fulfilling the social contract of being a good son to a person who could barely bring himself to be civil to me. I figured 20 years of that was more than he deserved and blocked him on every platform and haven't seen him since. Story 69, I'm struggling financially and mentally. I had to put my dog down shortly after moving. It sent me into a deep depression because I couldn't help him enough. I ended up taking my car back to the bank so I could start over. My dad insisted I take a job with him, but I found a better paying offer, and he refused to believe it was a better paying gig. Well, my parents began to see me turn things around faster than expected, and I could sense suspicion on their end. Then their vacation was canceled due to pandemic, so the day they were supposed to leave, they stayed home, and on that day they went through my room while I was at work. They thought I had been selling substance. I smoke, I don't deal. I discovered this the next morning when an old cell phone of mine went off at 1:30 a.m. It was an old alarm. They both refused to come clean. They then turned to the divide and conquer tactic. They pinned my brother against me for standing my ground. I now live in my truck. Check to check, waiting on my ship date. I enlisted in the Army. I will never go back there again. My dog was my last loyal companion. I miss that pup. Stay hard Redditors. Story 70. My in-laws, this was after years of trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. The second my son was born, they treated him poorly compared to his sister. We would call them out on it and tell them to be fair. We moved away for a couple years. They never reached out, so they didn't see the kids. Then when my son was 6, we moved back to town. The in-laws volunteered to watch them overnight, while my husband and I got things arranged and safe for the kids. When I went to get them in the morning, my son was visibly upset. As we were driving home, he begins to sob, asking why they hate him. It turned out that not only did they neglect him, they yelled at him when he tried to get food. They yelled at him for asking to play outside. They yelled at him for scaring the cats by playing on the floor. Then my sister-in-law threatened to spank him. He said she threatened to hit him because he knocked on her door because my daughter was in the room with her. They will never see the kids again. No one abuses my kid. They tried to talk their way out of it. I told them if they showed their faces near my kids again, law enforcement would be involved. It has been almost 4 years of peace. Story 71. Oh, hey, this is a sore point for me because it's both of my parents only 3 days ago and I still don't know if I'm in the right. Her. Low-grade threat and abuse throughout childhood, constantly bad-mouthing him to me because it's my house, scared off various friends who wouldn't come to see me anymore. Monthly, day-long family rows, always ending in meeting having to apologize and be hugged and touched by her when I was desperate to get away him. Let her do all of this. Stayed in their loveless marriage for 35 years. Abruptly left her to get back with his ex. Wanted me to help her out and still manage her feelings. Used her abuse of me as a weapon in a fight with her, so she called me in tears and I had to try and soothe her feelings. I just thought, they're not getting better, and I feel like every interaction I have with them diminishes me as a person. I don't want to be blamed for their failures anymore. They're not nice, and it's not my fault. Story 72. The final straw for me was when my mom didn't do her taxes. The reason this became an issue is because of the way the U.S. college education system worked. I argued with her for months before I went to college to do her taxes, and she just refused or tried to get me to do them instead, like an 18-year-old can figure out her business. The college sent me a huge bill to pay because I couldn't be considered independent, even though my parents were not helping me in any way financially, and I couldn't get any grants or money written off because I couldn't prove my mom was low income. They demanded I paid the money before I could continue college. Had to drop out and refused to talk to her since. My future got ruined because my mom couldn't do her taxes. I have no education and no money and no family roots, so I'm just floating through life, aimless. Story 73. I have a step-uncle from my grandma's current marriage that happened after my mom had already left home, who was never super close to the family. In more recent years, he had kind of got his life together and was trying to be more involved in the extended family. All cool. The more are the merrier in my... Anyway, we did the Facebook thing for a while until I shared an article thoroughly detailing why an armed protest is inherently not a peaceful protest just because the loaded guns that are prevalent never actually got fired. We went back and forth for a bit on the matter before he really started laying into me and a couple of other friends that had chimed in calling us all sorts of awful things. In short, easy come, easy go. I don't need that kind of toxicity in my life. Nothing wrong with a difference of opinion. But when you make it personal, especially when you're so clearly in the wrong, you clearly don't want to be close to me personally. Fiabu, this is also the uncle that honestly told me I needed to arm myself after the Orlando shooting. I'm gay, with a good guy with a gun, bad guy with a gun narrative. Story 74. My younger half-sister, we are in our early 50s now, used every possible tweaker scheme on me during the course of our lives. Unfortunately, if you don't use substances, you don't recognize the signs and the deranged crap that comes with it. I was a sucker for years. Final straw. As I moved my stuff into storage, her and her crazy-ass sidekicks were moving it right out the back door, claiming to help me move. It's been 10 years. Done is done. Story 75. My grandmother has told me my autism was caused by vaccines and that my mental health doesn't matter. The absolute last straw for her was when she made my cousin, 12, tell me he wanted to end his life because he knew she would never love him if he turned out to be like me. I'm relatively no contact with my mother after my mother continued, and still continues, to defend my grandmother by saying it's her beliefs and it's how she was raised. The raised comment pisses me off the most because my mother kept me in an abusive household for 15 years, where I was taught to keep my mouth shut, take the abuse, and let my father abuse me for the same of appearances. How your parents acted does not ever have to be how you act as a grown adult, and it's never an excuse either. Story 76. I left an extremely manipulative, abusive, psychopathic man after 20 years of marriage. He used to beat the crap out of me and our eldest, withheld affection and money, but was charming with others, especially in church. Even when I ended up on friends' doorsteps after a beating, they still stood by this charming man. We'd come back from someone that he deemed worthy of friendship and tell me that I was a constant source of embarrassment, too stupid to be with, too ugly to be around, and other nasty things that still keep me awake at night. The divorce was brutal. He removed our children that had been born in our marriage as children in our marriage, so that he wouldn't have to pay child support or for their education, and he still stalks me 20 years later. Our middle son has stood by my ex despite everything, and has even told me that the violence wasn't that bad. My middle son's wife quoted what my ex used to say to me and banned me from seeing my grandchildren because I was too stupid to be around. A constant source of embarrassment and would scare the children. I cut my son and his wife out of my life, and I'm at peace not having that bridge to cruelty. Story 77. When I asked my father why he never loved me, and he basically said he didn't want a girl. Bonus. Found out later from another family member that when my name was mentioned at Thanksgiving, at this point I hadn't seen my father in many years, he chimed in with, "Is she still playing the victim card? Victim?" Story 78. Sometimes it isn't one last straw. Sometimes it's a million reasons all at once. I spent a very long time waiting for a last straw, a big violent event that I could point to and say, "Look, see, wasn't I right to leave?" But that ignores all the other abuse I endured while waiting for something that I thought would be enough of a last straw to everyone else. And even when I did get it, my big abuse last straw, I was accused of being over-emotional and overreacting. So I went back, off and on, until my final goodbye was more like a ghosting after I got all of my vital documents secured or replaced. My calm, cool drifting away was above reproach. No last straw to fight over the validity of. So, just to anyone out there trying to find a last straw that might be applicable to them, any abuse at all is more than enough to leave. Go. Don't wait. Don't give a crap about what people will say. If it's enough for you, it's enough. Story 79. I can totally share my experience. I have not spoken to my mother in about 10 years. She's always been the most maliciously vindictive person I knew, and as an only child, I always caught the worst of her lies and spitefulness. She lost her job and all retirement savings because she refused to heed my advice to bail out of an employer that was clearly going under. Said to me, "You don't tell me what to do with my money," so she had nothing to help her get back on her feet, or so I thought. I'd flown several times to where she lived, bought her a computer, did resumes and biz cards for her to go on job interviews, which she sabotaged. Over about 6 months, I paid all her bills, gave her money for food and incidentals, and paid cash for medicals because she refused to apply for Medicaid. The last straw. While I was on another visit, she, right in front of me, bragged about what she was going to buy for another family member, then trashed me to the entire family when I wouldn't give her more money. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. Story 80. This is not a story about a big blowout or years of abuse or anybody endangering anybody. We used to be a tight-knit family. All of our extended family is in another country. So it was just my grandmother, her daughter and son, my dad, their spouses and children. That's all we have. My grandmother made a huge effort to have us over every weekend and for holidays and send us on trips together. Basically, she wanted us to get along. But my aunt's an entitled ass who wants to be at the center of everything, and she raised my cousins accordingly. For years, my cousin, who I thought was my best friend, was snarky and dismissive and tried to freeze me out of things. It took me a long time to realize that I don't have to put up with all their micro and not so micro aggressions that made me feel like crap. Since my grandmother died, we don't see each other that much, and I've learned to shut them off emotionally. We might get together for Christmas, but I don't think of them as family anymore. Story 81. When she told me I needed to sign over my children's survivor benefits to her to pay back all the money she spent on me growing up. The benefit payouts hadn't even started yet. The kid's dad hadn't even been gone a month. It was such an odd, surreal situation. Story 82. One of my great aunts acted all sweet and kind when my mother and brother were around. But if my sister or me were alone with her, she would yell at us and call us evil because she didn't like my father. My brother had a different dad. His dad died in a car accident shortly after he was born. Anyway, after my father died, she would come over to help out my mom well one day. When my mom was at work, she came over with Groxy and proceeded to scream, yell, and call me and my sister all kinds of things. I could have handled that, but it was when she said that she was glad my mother was finally free of that monster of a useless man. I lost. It didn't yell back, just started crying. When my mom came home, I told her I never wanted to be near that aunt again. I was 12 at the time. To this day, I haven't had contact with that aunt. And she never tries to reach out to me, so I'm fine with that. I don't need someone like that in my life. Story 83. My parents stole my tuition money. I was during my sophomore year of undergrad. I had all my tuition money in my bank account, one that my parents had helped me open when I was 16. They claimed it was so they could help me by providing extra cash when it got too low, and that they would help me through college. 2 weeks before quarterly tuition was due, I went to check my accounts, and the money was all gone. I confronted my parents, and they told me that my mother had back issues and needed a new bed. They informed me that the money was mostly theirs anyways. It was not. The money came from my job and my efforts. They contributed about $200 of the $2.5 thousand that was there. I immediately went out, sold my card collection, opened a new bank account, and gathered up my friends. We snuck all my essentials, my books, computer, what remained of my card collection, out the window, and I moved out that night. Story 84. My mother was in a nursing home, my father in assisted living. Mom has a pulmonary embolism. The staff call me after not being able to reach Dad or my older sister who is on the short list for emergency. I rush to the nursing home. Mom is too fragile to be hospitalized. Time to call siblings to say goodbye. I make calls and everyone comes to say goodbye. Older sister is furious because she should have decided who should know Mom was dying, not me. Sorry, sis. You should have answered your phone. If it had been me, I would have been grateful to whoever stepped in. Not the first time her ego caused trouble, just the last straw. Apparently, my mother's death was all about her. Story 85. I finally realized that my mentally ill mother, who refuses to get help, would inevitably tear apart my own mental health while I was around her in insidious ways that I don't believe she intended, but nonetheless left me in an unhealthy and regressed state. It took a long time to realize I had to choose between a relationship with her and a chance at healing and growing from the trauma I experienced growing up under her care. I wish it were different and that I was strong enough not to be affected. As much as I've accepted and come to terms with my decision, it's still difficult and sad, but ultimately I had to choose life. We haven't spoken in over 5 years. I'm now 37. I hope one day I'll have made the progress I need to be able to have some minimal contact with her in a safe way, but I don't know if that will be possible. Story 86? I actually have a response for this. He was a bad person. Abusive to my mom, blamed it on PTSD, but that's just la crap. He hit her before he ever went to war. We've left him since then, and I've had to talk to him twice a week because he's my dad, I guess. Recently, I've stopped talking to him because I just don't want to, and my mom supports my decision. I told him this, and he had the balls to ask, "Why are you mad at me?" I could have chewed him out. I could have ranted. I could have told him everything I feel about him, but I didn't. I decided not to give any more effort than that to him. I blocked him and haven't talked to him since. Story 87. My aunt's 50 years of emotional abuse toward my mother, and when my mother died, my mother hadn't talked to them in months either, haranguing my grieving father for an explanation about why my mother wouldn't talk to them anymore. And even when he explained to them, they still didn't get it. Then after that, targeting me with a weird obsessive behavior and calling constantly to check on me, and tattling to my sister, I'm 30, when I wouldn't answer their phone calls. If I could launch them all into the sun, I would. Story 88. Nothing really, they hit me. For my grandparents, it was me being mad and saying, "You're not my grandma" to my grandma when I was a kid. So I guess them hitting me was the last straw. Sadly not joking. Story 89. When he and my new stepmom, my mom's best friend when I was a kid, took turns using her FB Messenger when I tried to tell her exactly why she shouldn't let him help her raise the children she was caring for, or even be near them. His games are enough. Way uncool of her to drop in "Oh, I love you guys," and "Oh, your dad's not that bad," after I told her he literally allowed me to be trafficked. Ugh. Story 90. My sister came to my house and begged me to put her up for a couple nights, so I gave her my room and slept on the couch. She ended her life then and there. Ambulance took her away. She failed at that attempt. This was the final straw after many years of lying, stealing, substances abuse, and generally treating people like crap. I didn't see her again for a few years, until a mutual friend came to my house to tell me she finally succeeded in killing herself. She lived a very sad and destructive life. Story 91. I have several. 1. He pulled a gun on me. Why? I woke him up trying to take the dogs out. 2. She supported the person who molested her niece. Why? Because he had all the money. 3. When my uncle died, she needed money to bury him. What does she do? Try to take a gift she gave me back, saying I was supposed to pay for it later. Guess what? The motorcycle is still at her son's, the one who picked it up from me 4 years later. 4. My aunt, different from above, decided to go to my sister's graduation and not mine. We were both graduating the same day, from the same school, on the same stage. I later confronted her about it, and she said, I should be ashamed of all the models I own and conventions I go to because my sister was struggling with rent. Story 92. My aunt hit someone and he passed and got away with it. Everybody knows, yet there's nothing we can do about it. So we just cut ties with her and that side of the family. Story 93. My aunt and her 2 children are very toxic. They keep treating me like they're too good for me and I should bow to them. When my grandmother passed, I went over to them and told them we should stop fighting. They just shrugged as if I was inconveniencing them. They've stopped being my family for all I care. Story 94. My dad told me he wasn't proud of me when I graduated. He didn't need to say anything at all, but specifically went out of his way to say that. He had been emotionally and verbally, sometimes even physically, abusive for many years before this. And honestly, he made middle and high school hell for me. He made it so difficult for me to graduate, and then had the audacity to tell me he wasn't proud of me. I moved out a month later, and life could not be better. It was the single best decision I've ever made. Also, to clarify, he didn't say it out of anger or anything. He was completely genuine and sincere. It made it 100 more painful. Story 95. My mother planned for and created a long story to prepare for my brother's death. My brother had been dead for 9 months, and my parents had caught him attempting, but did nothing. Told no one. Just brushed it under the rug. My mother didn't cry the day he ended his life and wasn't surprised. There was no shock in her. She didn't even cry at the funeral. When I asked her about this years later, she said, life is for the living. I want 0 sociopaths in my life. Cut off for 12 years now. Story 96. My mentally abusive father broke into the house through the window in substances-fueled rage and traumatized me. I still think about it daily and haven't been able to let go of the whole situation. My mom and him got back together. She meets him every weekend. And denied that this was even a traumatic experience for me. Tried to get me to give him a second chance, claiming that it was all because of the substances, and he's still my dad. I'm damn sick of both my parents, and I still live with my mom. It's exhausting to see how unsupportive she was after this whole situation, and I just want to get away from her also. It's been over 1.5 years since it all happened. Story 97. Also, I don't know why I feel the need to justify, but he was sick due to no fault on my end. It was a birth injury and the result of medical malpractice. I did not cause his injury or allow him to be injured on my watch. There was just no reason for my dad to say that about me. Story 98. When my grandma was close to death, my dad's 3 oldest siblings tricked her into signing off her estate to them. She had dementia and didn't really understand what was going on. My dad wasn't as upset about being left out of the inheritance as he was pissed that no one came to see her on her deathbed. She was on hospice and calling out for them, but particularly her daughter, who refused to be bothered. On the 3rd day, I finally told her that my aunt wasn't coming and told her I loved her and asked her to let go. She passed that night and my dad's siblings passed to him. Story 99. My dad is an addict. He has been my entire life. I'm 30. He was on a bender a few years ago and threatened to burn down my house with my children sleeping inside. This all started after he threatened to hit my husband because I had ignored my younger siblings at a county fair. In reality, I had 3 small children and didn't see them, nor did they approach me if they saw me. It's all ridiculous. I have no contact with my dad, his wife, or my siblings on his side. I also have no contact with my mother or the siblings on that side, but that's simply because of substances use and what I will not allow around my own children. No threats or drama. Story 100. Funny. That happened to me just now. Dad's family, a grandma, 2 divorced aunts and 3 cousins, their daughters, toxic people. Humiliated my mom, me, and my brother for years with their superiority complex comments and actions. Dad never defended us because they manipulated him into thinking we were the bad ones. Last straw was when my dad was in ICU with COVID. They tried to get as much information as possible on his life insurance policy. Humiliated my mom and insulted her, telling her she almost hit him and then threatened her if she dared to tell my dad. Surprised, my dad found out. We cut ties with them. Now they keep threatening us, playing the victim card with other family members. Horrible people. Story 101. My brother married his high school sweetheart, and for a while, everything was great. But after they had their second kid, it's really started to seem like she was intentionally or otherwise poisoning his relationship with myself, my sister, and my parents. For reasons we can't fully understand. It's gotten so bad that my mom is now actively debating how to tell him he's cutting him and his wife out of their lives. Story 102. Having a child. I was used to putting up with the abusive behavior, but when I had a child, I realized that we are her main examples. I don't want her to allow herself to be abused like I was allowing, nor did I want her to emulate the abusive behavior herself. Once it was clear that my parents weren't going to change even after becoming grandparents, I was done. Story 103. My egg donor is a narcissist who doesn't care about anyone if it doesn't benefit her in some way. She raised me in a cult, JWS, and the second my issues were bad for her image, she'd kick me out of her house until she needed me to look good for her friends, then she'd force me back. I haven't spoken to her in going on 6 years now. The last straw was when she started pulling the same crap with my kids that she used to pull with me. My children are not show dogs for you to show off to your friends to further your perfect mom-grandma image. You hurt them, and you can go take a long walk off a short pier. Story 104. Oh, I can do this one. Blaming me for my mother pass as part of her speech at my mom's funeral. Unfortunately, we were only partially NC before that, despite the fact she had previously said, "If your mother pass of something, it will be your fault for the criminal crime of asking my mom to pick me up, drop me to the station whenever I visited home." Her argument was it was different to her, asking my mom to drive her to the supermarket or cooking for her children because your mom was doing those things anyway. It's not extra work. Story 105. My final straw was when my mother heavily implied that the reason my toddler is small is because I didn't feed her correctly when she was a baby and stunted her growth. My kid is fine. She's just genetically small and has been since she was born. 0 doctors. I haven't gone full no contact forever with my mom, but I'm taking a break and going to therapy until I decide how to move forward. Story 106. I will never forget this. My Bill and sister were getting divorced. He accused her of trying to hit herself in court. They have 2 kids, and I know there's no way in hell she would leave them to. She is somewhere between pit bull and mother hen. I was furious as hell and nearly yelled at the judge who was buying his crap. They reconciled, but I can't look him in the face. And he does know how pissed the mother-ducking duck-off I was. He doesn't even try with me. Story 107. Went to a family wedding. Everyone had a physical fight, not including me, and because I didn't take sides. My cousins, who I was super close with, decided to try and tell my mom and other family members I'd done substances even though I didn't. I've struggled with coke addiction in the past, so my mom didn't judge me, but I had to convince her it wasn't true. But the fact they tried to ruin my relationship with half of my family because I wouldn't take their side. I'll never speak to them again. Story 108. My mother phoned me on day 3 of my second child's labor to insist I leave my girlfriend in the labor room and pick up my other child from her. He's 8 and absolutely no trouble to look after. Because of pandemic, I'd been with him all of days 1 and 2, bar 2 hours visiting time. I refused and picked him up the next day. This caused a massive argument where I let them know that I've had therapy for years to get over my upbringing, which they said was all in my head. Haven't spoken to them since, nearly 2 months now. Story 109. My father disowned me. I wouldn't make the trip to see him for the summer cause of pandemic, so he disowned me. Damn him. I have a happier life here in Europe. Story 110. 15 found half-open vodka bottles rolling around the floor of the van. I was completely done defending him at that point, and my mother came and picked me up that night. After that, it was Christmas only at my grandmother's. This being before social media was a big thing. It also cost me my last remaining friend in that state. And that still hurts. The booze ended up eventually hitting him. Messed me up pretty well pretending to be the good, loyal son for the rest of the family. Luckily, my Bill saw through the act and was able to help me keep it together. Story 111. My cousin and aunt were always making fun of other family members in front of me like I was okay with it. I was not, but regretfully never spoke up. Finally, when they made fun of my mom for wearing sunglasses after she had cataract surgery, I just dumped them. No regrets. Story 112. Having a child. It brought everything into focus, and having experienced both love for my child and acceptance of the responsibilities that come with being a parent, her negligence and selfishness were too glaringly obvious to explain away with a blanket mental illness clause. Also, Mom, you were the worst. You prayed that Dad would cheat on you if he must cheat on you with someone, so you'd be able to forgive us and still to heaven. Story 113. When my dad completely cut my sisters and me out of his life for no apparent reason. No problem. It was a fairly strained relationship. Then his mom, my grandma, just stopped speaking to me and one of my sisters. She decides to start speaking to my sister again, who initiated is open for speculation. I have no problem with that either. But when my firstborn came along and I didn't receive any acknowledgement from my dad, grandma, and 2 aunties, that was it. Wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire. Their loss, my child, is the bee's knee. Story 114. When my aunt hid the death of my grandpa from us and my mom, she then had him cremated, and the house, car, and corner store arcade machines sold before we found out. He had Alzheimer's and didn't know what he was signing when she took everything. Story 115. They accidentally called city health inspectors to my house for a safety check in an attempt to get my house taken away so that I would move back in with them so they could control my life more. Story 116. My mother told me that I deserved it when my husband dumped me for someone else because I'm a crafty wife and mother. I'm an awesome mother, by the way. I cut off my entire family because not a single one of them helped me through my divorce. I had to go through it totally alone. Story 117. My dad saw him one night every weekend from ages of 13. Stopped seeing him after he became extremely mentally, verbally, emotionally abusive. But he'd still send me texts. Finally had enough when he told my mom he couldn't believe she'd believe a silly little girl with daddy issues over him about his own daughter. Been 3 years, and I'm so much happier without him. Story 118. When I was underage, I asked my cool uncle to get me a bottle of booze. He did, and forced me to give him some of my substance, saying he'd give me pills. Told him I didn't want his pills. I wanted money. Next day, tells my mom I forced him to buy me alcohol and tried to buy pills from him. Story 119. My aunt and uncle tried to enforce their will on my female cousin by telling her that they won't pay for the wedding if she didn't follow some rules they set out. Mostly, they didn't want her living with her fiancé before the wedding. We all laughed at their surprise when they weren't invited to her wedding. Personally, I would have invited them but made them pay cash for their meal and seat. Story 120. My father literally told me, "Let's go to the street to fight like we do not know each other," while we argued. I think he was more worried about being heard from our neighbors than from me. Story 121. At my mother's funeral. My friends had shown up to pay their respects. My counselor was a pothead burnout and noticed that one of my smoking buddies was present. As we're getting ready to leave, he legit pulls me aside and asks if said friend can score him an Oz of substances later in the afternoon. Didn't say a word, just turned and walked away. He had the audacity to text me a few hours later saying verbatim, "So what's good with that Oz?" Wiped from my existence immediately. Story 122. My brother is an addict and violent. My mother refuses to give up on him. I gave up on him the most recent time he got out of jail and told us he would turn his life around. I gave up because he only made it a couple weeks before he was hanging with his old friends and doing substance. We gave him a place to stay and things, and it was a couple weeks before he messed it all up. Story 123. What's sad is my mother has done so many ducked up things, and she's been cut out for so long that I don't even remember what the last straw was. The worst part is she's been told I never want to speak to her, and yet she still tries to talk to me for crap like my birthday. I have her number saved to my phone specifically to send it to voicemail. Story 124. Telling me that I was on my own after my dad died. It was most likely just about the funeral estate, but Grandma got punted out of my life after that. Backstory about my dad: he was an abusive alcoholic with untreated mental illness. The family and I tried helping him, but he refused, so I have up. That is what caused things to start to sour between my grandmother and I. Story 125. When I found out my mother was going behind my back and calling my wife to tell her I was cheating on her, I wasn't. Then it came to light later on all the horrible things she did to my sister. Haven't said a word to her in 11 years.